Normally, I like to nerd out over one running shoe at a time, but every once in a while, I think it's really important to zoom out and see how all of a brand's shoes fit together. This is Saucony Runing Spring 2026. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm an elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys about Saucony Runing, the entire brand lineup. But before I give you my thoughts on any of these shoes, I do want to go over some disclosures. Some of these shoes were shoes that were sent to me for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for them. Some of these shoes I bought myself. No one's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about Saucony Runing. And whenever I like to think about a brand, I always like to start with a daily trainer. And from Saucony, that is the Ride. This is Ride version 19. I think this is going to be in the running for most improved running shoe of 2026. As far as a daily trainer goes, the kind of shoe that you can tech out for most of your days, for most of your runs, I think the Ride 19 does an excellent job of combining both softness but also peppiness. So you could do a wide variety of types of runnings. It's comfortable but also durable. I think that the Ride 19 got much more soft. It got much more neutral. A lot of the things that I like to see in daily trainer are in this shoe, and the daily trainer is typically kind of the cornerstone of most running shoe rotations. But if you want something that's a little bit more premium than what the daily trainer of the Ride 19 has to offer, if you want something that feels a little bit taller, you have the Triumph. And this shoe uses a more premium kind of foam and has a very plush and comfortable upper for days where you want to be a little bit more comfortable. Maybe it's a recovery run kind of day, or maybe it's a long, slow distance kind of day. The Triumph 23 is a great place to start. Now, both of these shoes do have stability siblings or counterparts within the lineup. I can't run in stability shoes. They give me a lot of pain and problems. So I don't review stability shoes, but if you're looking for a stability version of the Ride, that would be the Guide. And if you're looking for a stability version of the Triumph, that would be the Hurricane. Now, if you want something that's a little bit faster than either of these two shoes, you kind of have to go to a shoe that's at this point almost an anachronism in the Saucony lineup, and this is the Kinvara. The Kinvara used to be the racing shoe. This used to be like the fastest, most high-tech shoe in the Saucony lineup outside of like actual track spikes. And this is the shoe that people not that long ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, were running marathons in a shoe like this. It's low to the ground. This one has almost no rubber on the outsole. Instead, it uses a ground contact midsole foam, so you still get plenty of traction, but also durability, and you're saving weight because you're not adding a rubber outsole to it. The upper is a little bit more streamlined, and the shoe is overall very lightweight. I've used Kinvaras for workouts on the track when I didn't want to put on spikes, and I feel like the Kinvara still can fit into that role today. But now Saucony has an entire other half of their lineup of running shoes that started about, I think I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, and that's the Endorphin series. And so this is something that a lot of brands do, where they'll have kind of two different sets of shoes that kind of have overlapping, if not identical use cases, but have very different experiences. And I think the reason why a lot of brands do it is because for shoes like the ones that I've already talked to you guys about, the Kinvara, which is on version 15 now, the Ride on version 19, the Triumph on version 23, these are shoes that have been around for a long time and have a very dedicated core base of fans who like these shoes pretty much how they are. They do change and modernize, but they change and modernize slowly, and that's by intention, because the people that are buying these shoes really like these shoes. But if the brand wants to reach out to other runners, the kinds of runners that maybe these shoes don't speak to, they need to be able to make different kinds of shoes. And so the option is either you drastically change the shoes you already have that are already popular, perhaps alienating your core base, or you create a whole new lineup of shoes, and that's where the Endorphin series comes in. The way that I would differentiate between these two shoes is that the Endorphin is the more of the speed-oriented, higher performance-oriented lineup of shoes. I don't want to say that they're for better runners or necessarily for faster runners, but for people that want a I only run it in my running shoes kind of experience. Whereas some of these other shoes that have been around for a longer time can not only appeal to dedicated runners, but they're also going to appeal to people who maybe haven't bought a pair of running shoes in a long time, someone that maybe want to use the running shoe for running, but also for casual wear as well, or for walking. And so a lot of these shoes have to balance the needs of both dedicated runners and also casual runners and walkers as well. So there's a couple of different kind of competing interests in terms of what goes on the legacy side of a brand's shoes, and then what goes on the newer side of the aisle. For the daily trainer, I would go with the Endorphin Speed. Now, technically, I think this like lines up function-wise closer to the Kinvara, because it is a beaded Piba foam, so it's a race caliber foam in here, and it has a plate, but it's a nylon plate, so not super rigid. It's a shoe that I would reach for on days where I want to go a little bit faster. Maybe I have a fartlek, maybe I have something with some up-tempo miles in it, something where I want to do a full-on workout. I feel like the Endorphin Speed is going to be a really nice choice. But this version of the Speed and the last couple of versions are also soft enough and compliant enough and versatile enough that they can be used as a daily trainer. So these days, I think it kind of fits better across from the ride. It can go really fast, but it also can do everyday kinds of running. It's really one of the most versatile shoes in the Saucony lineup, and I think it's not wrong to call it a tempo shoe, but it's also not wrong to call it the daily trainer. Now, if you want a shoe that's a little bit bigger, something that kind of sits across from the Triumph, Saucony introduced something new for 2026, and this is the Endorphin Azura. It's taller than the Endorphin Speed, but it's still using that really nice beaded Piba foam. It doesn't have a plate, but in my opinion, it doesn't need it. And in 2026, I think we're finally to the point where we're realizing that adding a plate doesn't always mean equals better. The Endorphin Azura is a really great proof of concept of that. Now, this shoe is taller, but it's not necessarily softer. So for a recovery run day or something where I want to be super comfortable, I'm not sure exactly Azura is the shoe I'd reach for. I'd probably reach for something like the Triumph or the Ride. But the way that I really enjoy using this shoe, because it has that race caliber foam, because it is lightweight, and because that upper is designed for speedier work, it's not super puffy and extra padded, I think that it's really great for a long run shoe. And that's kind of a subset of daily trainer, where you're using it 4 times where you're going to be on feet for a long period of time, and you might be going a little bit faster than normal. It can also handle workouts. It can also handle daily training, because it's a subset of daily trainers, so it can do all the things that daily trainers can do. But I think it's ideally suited for its best, highest use is for long runs that are going to be a little bit faster. Now let's talk about race day shoes. We haven't really talked about race day shoes yet from Saucony. The Kinvara used to kind of be the race day shoe from Saucony, but since the Endorphin Capsule came out, now that racing shoe is the Endorphin Pro. Now, this is a shoe that's also using that same beaded Piba foam that's in all these Endorphin shoes, but we're getting a carbon fiber plate and an even more race-oriented upper. Something that's a little bit more stripped down in terms of things we don't need, much more function over form. Saucony, I think, can do a really good job with race uppers when they want to. And this is a shoe that I would use as a racing shoe. But you also have 2 different race shoe options from Saucony, because we also have, in addition to the Endorphin Pro, we have the Endorphin Elite version 2. There are some substantial price differences between those two, and I think there's kind of a trend developing, which I don't like, where brands are making like a cheaper race shoe for like normies, and then like a super expensive racing shoe for their elite athletes and for people that want to pay the kind of money to make them feel like they're maybe elite athletes. But I think of these 2 shoes as different options. And I think that's the much more practical way of looking at any brand that has a multiple race shoes. Typically, one of those shoes is made for one kind of runner and the other kind of shoe is made for another. And I'd say with Saucony, the Endorphin Pro is a shoe that's going to suit midfoot and heel strikers a little bit better. The geometry that's in the back of this shoe is a little bit flared, so that way it can resist the shoe from collapsing underneath the weight of that first impact of your foot towards the road, and then you're supposed to roll through that foot strike and push off into the next stride. And I think that the Endorphin Elite 2 is more geared towards forefoot strikers. It's got a giant landing pad up front. It's got a disarticulated forefoot and rear foot, and relative to how wide the forefoot is, the rear of the shoe is a little bit more slender. Now, in reality, I think that both of these shoes can be used by a wide variety of runners. And so I think Saucony is kind of playing it safe, more middle of the road in terms of not wanting to alienate any one kind of runner versus another compared to some of the other brands that are out there. So while I think the Endorphin Pro 5 is a little bit more towards midfoot and heel strikers, and I think that the Endorphin Elite is a little bit more towards midfoot and forefoot strikers, I think that those are kind of loose ways to kind of start your analysis as to which of those two race shoes you might want to look at. But another way to look at these two shoes is that the Endorphin Elite 2 is using a different kind of high-end racing foam than we see in any of the other shoes that are on this table now. And this is a very squishy foam, and it does decompress relatively quickly. I wish it would decompress a little bit more snappy to give it a little bit more pep, but there's a lot of compression and a lot of decompression that goes along with this shoe, and for some people that's going to lead to a very unstable feeling. So that's where I think that the foam that's in the Endorphin Pro is just a little bit more resistant to quick decompression and deformation of that foam, is going to feel a little bit more predictable and secure for certain runners. So if you're someone that doesn't like for your race shoes to be super squishy, I'd say go with the Endorphin Pro 5. If you prefer your racing shoes to be really squishy and dynamic, which is how I like my race shoes, I would say go with the Endorphin Elite 2. So that's not all the shoes that are in the Saucony lineup, but these are generally the shoes that you're thinking about when you're thinking about Saucony running in 2026. Now that we've talked about how each of these shoes works individually, let's talk about some hypothetical shoe rotations. Not to say that everyone needs to have a shoe rotation all using shoes within the same brand, but I think by talking about how these shoes could fit together or complement each other, it might make it easier to understand how each of these shoes kind of works. So when it comes to building a rotation, I always want to start with the daily trainer. So for me, I think that I would pick the Ride 19 as the daily trainer within the Saucony lineup. And then I don't think that I would really need to have a Kinvara or a Triumph in a 4-shoe rotation from Saucony, because I'm personally a really big fan of everything that's going on over here in the Endorphin side of the lineup. Now, I think that from a workouts perspective, I would probably want to go with the Endorphin Speed, and I could probably put the Endorphin 5 Pro away. I think that these two shoes are really similar, and I hope going forward that Saucony puts a little bit more distance between the workout nature of the Endorphin Speed and the race nature of the Endorphin Pro 5, because I would, from a racing perspective, want to have the Endorphin Elite instead. So that leaves the Endorphin Azura, and I think that I would use this shoe as my long run shoe, as my fartlek shoe, anytime I'm gonna be on my feet for a long time, but also want to go kind of quickly, and I may not want to reach for my race shoe quite yet. Now, if I had to then whittle this down into a 3-shoe lineup, I think the shoe that I would kick out would be the Ride 19. As much as I do like this shoe for this year, I think that I could use the Azura in a lot of the ways that I'm using the Ride 19. And I think the only real gap that this 3-shoe lineup would give me is that I wouldn't really have a great shoe for a recovery run day. I think that some of the softness in the Ride 19 might be something that I'm missing out on. Now, if I were then going to reduce this down into an even further slimmed down lineup and wanted only 2 shoes, I think I would have to get rid of the Endorphin Speed, and then I would go with just the Azura and the Elite 2. The Azura could be that workhorse that does everything from recovery run day to long run day, every day, and then some speed work, and then I would have to lean a little bit heavier on my race shoe for a lot of bigger, faster workouts and some of those speedier, tougher long runs, as well as for my racing. But that's how I would put a 2-shoe rotation. So those are my thoughts on Saucony running as of 2026. Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, I used to kind of wrap this inside my running shoe videos, but I found that it made the overall running shoe video really, really long. So in an attempt to not be repetitive and have to repeat this every time I reviewed a Saucony shoe, for example, I thought I would do this maybe like once or twice a year for each of the brands, and then we could kind of talk about them all at once. as we get through like a burst of new shoe releases or whenever the timing seems right. So let me know if you like this. I'm trying something new for this year, but also if you have any questions about any of the shoes that I talked about today, let me know in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Running Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?